why you felt the need that is something that is for the Kenyan market, for example, for the regional market. What advised you coming up with such a product?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, as Ogilvy, we're in the business of creativity. We actually say borderless creativity to impact brands, to impact people in the world. In essence, what we do is, connect consumers to brands through the power of ideas brought to life in many different ways, often through the power of creative storytelling. And having, I think in that realm, you can have brands do the talking and tell you what they stand for, as in kind of, any conversation. And that's very powerful, whether it's, in our versions, doing a speech or making your own video or your own film so you can actually present your point of view. But it is always and has always existed. It's also extremely powerful to have other people actually talk about you, and potentially more trusted, you know. So if somebody, tells you, here's, a great thing to watch, or here's, a great thing to buy, or here's some great food, or here's a great restaurant, you potentially are going to believe it more than if you see the actual ad. And that's always existed. The power of influence has always existed in many kind of, different shapes and forms, and it's been leveraged in many different kind of, ways, whether it's for political reasons or for, I don't know, for getting a girlfriend, to make sure that that girl likes you. I mean, it's just always kind of, been used. It's also always existed, I think, in the world of communications, as but mostly through people with disproportionate impact, such as key opinion leaders or media, and journalists and things like that. But what we've actually obviously seen with the proliferation of social media is that there's just a huge amount of people that have creative power, have a voice, and that through these platforms can reach consumers. And so that is the business of influencer marketing, is to a practice that has always existed, a tool that has, always existed and that was always powerful, to unlock basically the trusted voices of others to promote you in one way or another. To now do that at scale with a huge amount of people that are out there and that clearly have a lot to say and can do it in incredibly creative ways. And that's what influencer marketing is about. It's still a very early discipline, just I suppose a good 5, 6, 7 years, I suppose, to in the shape and form that it is going now, and so it's still finding its way. But it is really that practice is about just to connect brands with people who have a voice, and connect them through creative storytelling in one way or another. And why that I find that really interesting for Africa is that I've lived in many different places around the world. And one of the things that I think is very, there's talent everywhere, but I really do believe that there's a sense of energy, entrepreneurship, and talent that exists disproportionately on, the African continent, and hence the opportunity to tap into that massive creativity that exists there, and to unlock that, to help brands grow, then that in exchange fuel the economy here, I find quite interesting. And that's, I think, why Ogilvy is one of the world's leading agencies in influencer marketing. We have about 300 experts around the world just dedicated to this business. It is growing fast, just multiplying every year. We're the most rewarded agency in the world in this practice as a kind of global network, and being able to bring this capability here to Africa is really super interesting. And this evening I've clearly met a whole bunch of very cool people who clearly have a tremendous amount of creativity, tremendous amount of power, I suppose, through those social platforms. And brands would be foolish not to try to figure out how they can tap into that energy and that creativity, I think.
My question will be, within the market that you operate in, which you lead, EMEA market,
Yeah.
what are some of the key trends that you have been able to see, project, like let's say in the coming decade? Because everybody says the EMEA market, the SSA market, especially the African space, is the next frontier for growth when it comes to marketing, when it comes to where brands need to be, not just brands, but companies where they need to invest. And you as a marketing agency, and as you say, who comes up with ideas, what are the key trends?
So I think first and foremost, I feel that there is a renewed interest and energy actually around ideas. So over the last 2 decades, there's been such a proliferation of channels, new platforms, as I kind of mentioned before. I started in this business before the internet, so just imagine everything that kind of happened in the meanwhile. And I think brands and the industry as a whole has been just trying to keep track of all those new channels, those new formats, new ways to engage that consumer, trying to understand how the consumer was kind of playing into it. But while that is still very, important, I think there is somewhere a sense of there is a little bit of consolidation of going like, okay, we'll actually understand what's going on there. There's always constant innovation that's still happening there. But because we've gone through so much change, we've kind of organized ourselves to deal with innovation, things coming up. And what we still, I think, as brands ultimately believe in is the power of ideas. And so I was incredibly inspired by for example, a company like AB InBev, which is truly a global player, who committed itself about 6 or 7 years ago to say, as a company, we have been growing by entering new markets through acquisitions. But what we've kind of seen today is that that starts to be not the solution anymore. What we really believe is that if we commit ourselves to creativity, to connect consumers to our brands, that's our platform for growth. And hence, as a global marketeer of that size, over the last 5 years, they've reorganized themselves around the mission of creativity for business, through setting themselves up through structures, through academies, through training, through all kinds of different initiatives. And they're seeing the real outcome of that, with real results in terms of the business, the highest possible volume, great kind of sales results, and also a recognition, I think, as our industry of being Creative Marketeer of the Year at Cannes for 2 years in a row, which can only happen if you show consistent commitment and outcomes in the creative world that drives real business impact. So that's an overarching trend that I basically see. Now, to still reach consumers, I think there's a lot of interest in influencer marketing. I think that has shifted from, there's I think more interest in that because it has shifted from, let's say, few influencers to more influencers to now this incredibly interesting space of creators. and for brands to figure out how to deal with, you know, not just going through a few, but to play into that rich kind of, you know, set of micro communities and figure out how they can do that. So it's a new form of mass advertising by not doing one single thing to one broad audience, but by engaging with different communities, but in a much kind of, you know, deeper way for impact. I think that's still, you know, very much a trend that is out there, and I think in the influencer space, it's going really fast because there's a lot of talk about now artificial influencers as well. There's also a lot of, you know, interest in influencer commerce, basically. So how do you not necessarily only leverage influencers to, I suppose, create awareness and consideration for a brand by using their products or talking about the products, but by bringing, you know, direct gateways to actually allowing their followers and their fans actually buy products kind of, you know, through them. So it's a fast kind of, you know, moving space. So ultimately, I think, you know, where I see the interest from, you know, like still very much ideas combined with continuous commitment to figuring out how consumers engage with brands through new ways, through new channels, and overall brands just organizing themselves around those two things, organizing themselves for big ideas, but organizing them also for constant innovation and experimentation to actually, you know, connect this drive for ideas with what is the latest and newest kind of, you know, out there. So I think that's very different from when I kind of, you know, grew up in the industry, where proven formulas, repetition of the same things, to a much more, you know, commitment to the essence, but actually also a commitment to an agile way of working to constantly organize ourselves for what's new and what's upcoming, basically.
Just a follow up to sum up on that. Now that Ogilvy, I understand Ogilvy Africa, but now Ogilvy the brand from a global space. What do you stand to gain from InfluenceO, the new product the new platform that you've launched? Because you'll be working with so many different partners, different content creators. But what do you stand to gain from that?
Well, again, our commitment is to connect consumers with brands. That's what we basically do. So, you know, that's what we're being asked to do, is to try to, on behalf of brands, make sense of where consumers are, how they engage, and then unlock, I suppose, that power and that opportunity to benefit the brand. And that's the business that we've always been in, no matter what changes basically around us. And InfluenceO helps us with a very robust methodology, set of tools to, I suppose, unlock the incredible power and creativity of, you know, creators and influencer marketing for brands at scale, with speed, and with also a sense of making sure that it actually has impact, finding the right, you know, influencers or content creators for the brands, being able to put things in place, you know, connect what the brand is about to what the influencer or content creator can authentically be about, be able to track if that is actually kind of, you know, working, and not necessarily just specifically on that particular campaign, but basically across all of the different things that we do. That just gives us more intelligence and insights in terms of what works and doesn't work, and to activate that on behalf of brands. And that's what we always have been about. So it's the power of methodology and tools to be able to scale things, to drive better impact kind of faster, to be smarter and more intelligent about that, and then again, you know, make both parties basically benefit from that.
And talking of AI, it's still most people will say it's still a new animal, especially in the Kenyan context. How do you, for example, convince the influencers that you target that the AI that you're going to use is not going to, for example, infringe on their privacy or interfere in any way with them the way they normally function?
Well, I
Because
think
those are some of the things that come up whenever you talk of a new, especially a new technology or a new thing in the market.
yeah. Look, I love when these new things kind of happen, because to be honest, like it just keeps us on our toes, to be honest. And I think you have to always be optimistic about these things. So many revolutions have happened to the world, and humanity is still here and thriving more than ever. Yes, there are lots of issues in the world, but I think if you're from a macro perspective, I think a lot of things are going well. That doesn't mean that there are not some significant world problems that have to be tackled. But so I think with AI, it is definitely a revolution, and it is going really fast. But the only thing that I think we have to kind of commit to is to collective learning, consolidation of what we learn, in a spirit of doing the right thing. I think that's what it is about. I think there's a lot of fear, out there that it will take jobs, it will, not respect intellectual property, it will drive fake news, it will, share information that's not supposed to kind of, be shared. But if we go about this in a I think, a considered way, knowing the principles of what we kind of need to safeguard, but then embrace it and see what it actually does for us. I think as any other, who would have thought that social media, I mean, remember when Facebook started, my God, who would have thought the billion-dollar industry that it has created, the empowerment that it has given to consumers, to people who build their careers on that, the small businesses that can benefit from everything there. And with all of these revolutions, there's obviously things to watch, things to care, things to consolidate, things to organize, things to kind of make sure that it doesn't go into the right direction. But ultimately, I think all of these things ultimately benefit the world. And if we do it with that intent, it's just going to be an interesting ride for the next few years to see where it goes.
In terms of influencer marketing, and as you said, you've been around for like 3 decades. It's how influencing is done. That's what has changed over the last 3 decades. What do you feel, or what do you believe is the future of influencer marketing, especially in terms of now the introduction of AI and that kind of technology, and how also the platforms keep changing? Like one day it's Facebook that is on top, now there's TikTok that is taking over. How do you feel the influencer marketing is changing in that light?
Yeah. Again, I'm like sounding like a broken record, but I believe some of the things don't change, right? So ultimately, influencer marketing has always been about, unlocking the influence of somebody else to do a job for you. But you can only do that if that person or that group or whatever, you can connect it in a genuine way with what you would like them to talk about. So, I don't think those foundations will ever change. It's ultimately about, a lot about authenticity and really kind of honest engagement, tapping into somebody else, power, talent, influence to do something on your behalf. And while AI will help us with potentially certain mechanics, certain intelligence, lots of intelligence, very good at fast understanding, what works, what doesn't work, the insights and the intelligence, when it might help us identify more which influences are right for which brand, and just all of that work that a lot of it was manual or through other tools, it will allow us to kind of do those things just better and faster. And I think everybody kind of will benefit from that. But if we all stick to somewhere like, the job of anybody is to engage, audiences with something that interests them, which is on a premise of understanding what they want and how they do that, to do that authentically, and for brands to be able to play into that, I think those foundations will basically never really change. It's just the mechanics around it, the speed with which you do it, the formats with which you do it, the speed with which you understand if it works or doesn't work. All of those things, kind of will potentially will go faster and change how we do it, but the essence of it won't